Yo, what's going on, everyone? My name is Benjamin Nowak, and this is the Smallmouth Experience, and today we're back with another tip and technique video, which you guys have absolutely been loving lately. You guys have been giving me so much love on these videos. I want to keep these things rolling, so if there's certain techniques or baits you guys want to see me talk about, let me know down in the comment section below. The comment section might have moved, but go find that comment section. Let me know down there what you guys want to see in future videos. Now, today what we're going to talk about is Ned rig fishing, and a Ned rig gets a lot of reputation as being a small fish catching bait, but the fact is you can catch both numbers of fish and giant fish on this technique. It has been my most productive technique so far in 2020. So I want to break down what I'm doing, where I'm fishing it, how I'm fishing it, when I'm fishing it, and the gear I'm using to be successful and confident in this technique. We're going to do this same style of video as I did for the tube video and my other tip and technique videos, where we break it down in that fashion. So let's start by talking about where I'm fishing this bait. And what's so cool about a Ned rig is its ability to be effective in just about any situation. You can fish it just about anywhere in a variety of different ways, which we'll talk about, and still be effective in catching fish because it's a very small profile. It is a do-nothing sort of action, which means it really doesn't have a ton of movement down there. So it draws fish, it gets bites, and it's a small profile that looks natural in the water. So you can fish it just about anywhere. Now, my suggestion for you guys is do not use it as a search bait. Use it as a way to pick up bites in an area where you're otherwise unsuccessful. So if you fish an area with a crankbait or a jerkbait or a jig, you were unsuccessful, but you think to yourself, man, there should be fish here, pick up a Ned rig, cast it out there, and fish it slowly along the bottom and try to draw bites from those fish that are living in that area where you know that there are fish, because they'll typically bite a Ned rig when they won't bite anything else. So use it as a way to draw bites from fish that are in an area where you know fish are located. One thing that I typically won't do, however, is go to like a big, vast flat or go using it to fish down a bank, because it's not a great way to cover a lot of water. It's something that I'll use very targeted situations when I know there are fish in an area to just draw bites from fish that are living there. So kind of moving into when I'm going to fish this. Again, just like where, you can fish it all year long. Fish it spring, summer, winter, fall. You can change your profile and your bait size with the trailers you're using or the baits you're using on your Ned rig. So it can be fished all year long. Dirty water, clean water, anything, you can use a Ned rig and still be successful. Now, how I'm going to fish this bait. And this is where things will start to get a little bit more complex, but how I'm going to fish this bait, there are three main approaches. The first is just cast and drag. Super, super simple approach. This is like fishing 101. All you do is make a long cast with this thing as long as you can to an area where you think fish are at, and just take that rod and just slowly drag it. When you feel a piece of cover, you'll just hold it there. And you'll just slowly drag it. Or even simpler, you cast it out and you just let it sit there. Now, here's the big thing about fish and what's called dead sticking. Fish are very perceptive. Think if you're sitting in the boat and something fell from the sky 15 feet to the right of you, right? Well, the fact of the matter is, us being perspective humans, having basically knowledge of the things that are going on around us, we will recognize that that fell 15 feet from us, even if we didn't see it, right? We can hear it, we can tell that something changed around us, and we'll typically know. Fish are the same way when they're underwater. If you cast this Ned rig out and it drops 5 foot to the right of that fish, they typically know it's over there. Now with a Ned rig, because it's so low motion, because it doesn't really look like anything or do a whole lot down on the bottom, those fish are more apt to be curious. They're more apt to say, okay, what is that? It doesn't look dangerous, so I can go over and check it out, and they can't feel it with hands because they don't have hands. So be willing to kind of dead stick a bait or very, very slowly fish it along the bottom, because those fish are curious creatures. If something's moving, looks natural, doesn't look scary, they're more apt to come over, pick that bait up, and eat it. Another good way to fish it is when you cast it out there and it's on bottom, just slowly shake your rod tip. All that's going to make that bait do, maybe scoot around a little bit, but really it's just going to give it a side-to-side wobble down there, and it'll entice those fish to bite that are looking at the bait. So slow drag or slow shake with your rod tip to kind of get that bait to move down there on the bottom. Shake the slack. My second approach for fishing a Ned rig is basically target fishing. So this is what I'll do when I know there are certain pieces of cover in an area that I want to fish really thoroughly. For example, big smallmouth bass like to hang around big boulders. Well, a lot of times, especially early spring, or the springtime when those fish are moving up shallow, you can see the boulders with your eyes. So I'll take a Ned rig and I'll cast it to that specific boulder or that specific piece of cover, or there's a dark spot and I want to fish it with a Ned rig. So what I'll do is I'll take and I'll cast that bait out there. It'll sink to the bottom, and I'll intentionally fish it as close to that piece of cover as I can. I want to draw that fish off of that piece of cover. Now, I've probably already fished it with a jerk bait and a crankbait and 3 or 4 other baits, so you might have to be a little bit patient, but make targeted presentations with a Ned rig. It falls pretty much straight down, sits pretty much straight up off the bottom. We'll draw fish to that bait, and we'll get a lot of bites from those fish that are curious and looking at it. So targeted cast to specific pieces of cover underwater is a really effective approach when you're fishing a Ned rig. So that's approach number 2. Now approach number 3, and this is probably the sneakiest approach when using a Ned rig, is casting and reeling that bait. It's very similar to the same way you fish a hair jig. It's a great way to cover shallow flats when you know fish are in that area. They're looking up, they're feeding up, especially in the early post-spawn. So spawn and early post-spawn, casting and reeling a Ned rig is a great approach. The reason it works so well is those fish are aggressive, they're looking up, and a really small profile just naturally swimming through the water is a great way to draw some big bites. And one of the biggest mistakes people make when they're using this approach is they're using their rod too much. They're overfishing that bait when it's in the water. All you want to do is make a long cast as long as possible, sink it 3 foot below the surface. Typically, I'm fishing no deeper than I can see. Like if I can't see bottom, I'm not going to use this approach. And then all you're going to do is swim it mid-column. Super slow. As slow as you can turn that handle. And all that bait's doing is crawling through the water column. And it just looks like a bait fish. Looks like a little piece of nothing swimming through the water. Very unobtrusive. Not dangerous at all. Those fish are getting curious. They are hungry, and they'll come over and eat it. Smallmouth are very territorial, and they're very curious. So if you fish something slowly by them, a lot of times that fish can't resist but to come up and look at it and eat it. Remember, with a Ned rig, with all approaches, bass do not have hands. So if they want to feel your bait, they have to do it with their mouth. So by using techniques that are going to draw them to them and don't look scary, that do nothing approach, you can get a lot of bites from curious bass that really didn't have any interest in eating. That's what makes a Ned rig so effective. That's what makes those do nothing approaches so effective. So casting and reeling around shallow flats in the, I guess, pre-spawn through post-spawn is a very effective technique when a lot of guys are throwing hair jigs, when a lot of guys are throwing topwater, when a lot of guys are throwing jerk baits. You can absolutely smash fish on this technique, swimming it along. Or you can swim it in deeper water when you know those fish are suspended. So really those 3 approaches, cast and drag or shake, basically target fishing with it to very specific pieces of cover, or casting and swimming it up in the water column, no deeper than what you can see. Now let's move into the gear that I'm using. And we're going to talk about the baits that I'm throwing last. So the rods that I'm using are typically between 6'9" and about 7 to 7'3". I'm using light rods. So these are medium light rods, a medium or a medium light rod, 6'9" to 7'3". This is a TFO Tactical Elite prototype rod we're working on. This is the one you guys are seeing me use currently in all of my videos. 7'1", medium light, moderate fast action. This is a 6'9" medium spinning rod, Tactical series from Temple Fork Outfitters. Another really good choice, but really either a medium light or a medium power rod. The reel that I'm throwing is a high speed gear ratio reel, and this is really important. When you're fishing a bait where bass can eat it and run to you, you want something that you can pick up line really quickly with. So I'm using high speed gear ratio reels, 6 speed gear ratio reels. What that gear ratio means is the amount of line it picks up per revolution of the reel. So it's 6 2-to-1 gear ratio, picks up a lot more line than your traditional 5-speed spinning reels. So I like a high-speed gear ratio reel to keep up with those fish, especially for smallmouth bass. This is particularly important. I'm using that 3000 size Team Loose Custom Pro reel, 15-pound test braid to 6 or 8-pound test fluorocarbon leader. I will not go heavier than 8-pound test line when I'm fishing a Ned rig because it's a very slow approach, dragging along the bottom. So that lighter line is going to get me more bites than, say, 10, 12-pound test line. And then the braid size that you want to choose is basically whatever you're comfortable with. I really like 15-pound test line. But if you want to go to 10 or 8 pound test braided line, you can. Braid's important though. You want to be able to make a long cast with that. So that braid's going to help you be able to make a longer cast. Another really critical piece about the line that you're using, you want to run a very long leader when you're fishing a Ned rig for 2 reasons. One, invisibility. You don't want to have this 6-foot leader and then you have a bunch of red or green or high-vis yellow line in front of that bait. Fish are perceptive. They can see that line when it's 6 foot off your bait. I run a 30+ foot leader. So what I'll do is I'll tie this leader and then reel it up into the reel. And the reason I do that is because it's way more invisible to the fish. The other reason, and I hear this all the time from people that finesse fish, they break off fish a lot. Like fish are breaking off. They're losing a lot of fish. They're bending out Ned rig hooks. The reason you're doing that is because your leader isn't long enough. So when you set the hook on those fish, you're shocking that leader. What that means is you're essentially using fluorocarbon line. Braid has no stretch. So when you hit that fish, your fluorocarbon tries to stretch. It doesn't really have any, so it just snaps instead. Especially with light line, it's really important to run that longer leader to your bait. I promise you'll break off less. You'll catch more fish, so running a longer leader is really important. With your reel, I set my drag pretty loose. These are light wire hooks, so having a loose drag is going to help keep more fish pinned because your hooks aren't going to be bending or flexing on you. And it's also going to help you get a better hookup into that fish because once that hook goes in, your drag starts to slip. It's going to give that bait the leverage it needs to go into their mouth, but not pull it out of their lip, right? Not break the skin if you get them skin hooked. So long leader, light drag will land you way more fish when you're fishing a Ned rig on light line and spinning setup. The line I'm using is P-Line Tactical Fluorocarbon. The other one that I like is Sunline Sniper 8, 7, 6 pound test line. The Ned heads that I'm throwing are basically one of 3 different varieties. My favorite of all time so far is this Berkley Fusion half head. And I'll basically fish anything from an 1/8 ounce up to a 1/4 ounce. A 1/4 ounce being one of my favorites just because I can cast it a long ways, get it away from the boat, and fish it in shallow water or fish it in moderately deep out to like 20 foot deep of water. So a 1/4 ounce size is probably my all-around go-to, but Berkley Fusion half heads, the keeper on here is really good. I like the way that head comes through cover, and I really like the hook that's on here. Doesn't have much flex, doesn't break on me, and it just keeps a lot of those fish pinned. So 1/4 ounce is probably my all-around go-to size for most of those techniques. Now when I'm swimming that bait up in the column, I'll go to like an 1/8 ounce, but 1/4 ounce is pretty much my favorite size. Another really good one is the Perfect Ned head from Outcast Tackle. This is Josh Douglas's design. Essentially what they were trying to do is come up with a Ned head that will always right itself when you put tension on it. So it basically has a rounded body with that flat head, will stand up really, really effectively, has a really good bait keeper and a premium hook in there. So the Perfect Ned head is also really good. And I've started pouring my own from Do It Molds. This is the Midwest Finesse Jig mold. And the reason I like being able to pour my own is using that Gamakatsu 111 hook. It's an O'Shaughnessy bend hook, keeps fish pinned. It's not a super heavy wire, but it doesn't bend out and it won't break on you. So using premium hooks is something that's really neat. About being able to pour your own Ned heads. You can use premium hooks, use the components you want, and also you have a really good bait keeper system on there as well. Now to move into the part that everyone gets super excited about, talking about my favorite baits to throw. And there's really a couple different ways of classifying my favorite baits. One of my favorite baits is the Z-Man TRD Ticklers, and this is something Z-Man came out with last year. The TRD Ticklers is unique because it has these little tentacles that come off the back. To me, that's a big deal. Now, do I think it does a whole bunch of different things under the water that a normal like Ned rig does? Probably not. But just having something with a little bit of movement gives me the confidence that I need to be successful. What I was doing prior was using the Z-Man the Z-Man hula sticks. The Z-Man hula sticks are another really great choice. What's nice about the hula sticks, it's a longer, like 5-inch profile, so you can cut it down and use half for just a standard TRD Ned rig and the other half almost like a Ticklers, but I don't have any more on the boat. So the TRD Ticklers is one of my favorites, or the Z-Man hula sticks. Now my color selection is super simple. All-time favorite color in Ned Rig is what's called Drew's Craw, which I'll show you that here in a minute. It's basically a green pumpkin back with a little bit of orange and green flake, and then the belly is sort of like this whitish, off-white with some black flake. Looks like a crawfish, looks like a bait fish, draws big bites no matter where you fish it anywhere in the country. I've used it in Tennessee, I've used it in Michigan, I've used it down when I was in Florida a little bit with Mikey a couple years ago. That Drew's Craw is my all-around favorite color. Another really good one is the Deal, which is the color that I'm showing you guys right here. Basically green pumpkin back and like a pearlescent whitish yellow belly. Looks like a bunch of different bait fish, or just standard green pumpkin. Standard green pumpkin, you can't go wrong. Really good color all around. My next favorite is the X-Zone Lures Ned Zone. The reason I like the Ned Zone is because it's a little bit bigger than your standard Z-Man plastic, your standard TRD Z-Man plastic, and it has that bulb on the end. That bulb does have a shimmy underwater, so I like it when I rig it on a Ned rig because that thing just shimmies and moves a little bit more, in my opinion, than your standard TRD Ned rig baits. So the X-Zone Lures Ned Zone. I really like the 309 color, or this color called Dirty Shad. Dirty Shad to me looks very similar to that Drew's Craw. Looks like it could imitate a crawfish, could imitate a bunch of different bait fish, could imitate gobies, just super versatile color. So either the Dirty Shad or the X-Zone 309. Now something that is not maybe as popular is the Robo Worm Ned rig bait. It's called the Ned Worm, but it's 3 inches long. My only gripe about this, it's awesome. It catches a bunch of fish. My only gripe is how soft this is. You'll catch 2 or 3 fish and you will be done. Like, this thing will break apart. This thing will be off your bait. And so you don't get very many fish out of this, but it's super soft. So it has a little bit of action down there when you don't want like a ton of movement. Super soft bait, but gets a lot of bites. All-time favorite color in the Robo Worm plastics is the Aaron's Magic. So Aaron's Magic or Aaron's Green Pumpkin are my favorite colors in Robo Worm. Basically green pumpkin, a little bit of blue and brown. Catches fish everywhere and imitates a variety of different bait fish. And finally, sneaky soft plastic to finish this thing out. And I got a lot of comments on my last video because no one has ever seen people throw this on the Ned rig, I guess. But it's the Z-Man TRD Hogs. It's a unique profile, has these little tentacles coming off of it. Doesn't look like anything too crazy, but I think it looks like a hellgrammite or it looks like a crawfish. Again, very versatile, but it has movement. So this TRD Hogs is a really good bait when the water gets off color. Like when you're fishing around off color water and you want to give those fish something a little bit bigger profile where they can find it and come over and eat it, I really like the TRD Hogs. Again, this is that Drew's Craw color. So green pumpkin top, orange flake, black flake, and on the bottom you have that white with some green, orange, and black flake. Now here is the secret of Z-Man plastics. If you're going to use these baits, when you're going to use these baits, the first thing you're going to want to do before you put it on your hook is stretch this thing out, okay? This does one of two things. One, any salt that's in there removes it. The other thing that it does, gives you a little bit bigger profile. So if I pull just your standard TRD Hogs out of there, here's the one I stretched. Here's the one that's straight out of the package. You get a little bit bigger profile, more buoyant, then you super glue this thing on your hook and it will last forever. This bait right here is from 3.5 weeks ago, and I've caught a bunch of fish. And the only reason it looks cockeyed is because I screwed it up when I was trying to pull it out of a fish's mouth. But I have caught so many fish on this bait, and you can't rip it. It's unbelievable. So, just a really good bait, lasts a long time, and that TRD Hogs gets bit when other Ned rig baits are struggling when things get tough and dirty. So, those are my Ned Rigs secrets. Hopefully you guys learned something. If you did, please do me a huge favor. Give it a thumbs up. If you are not already subscribed, please hit the subscribe button. I love to chase big smallmouth all across Michigan, all across the country, and I want to share those experiences with you guys. So please hit that subscribe button down below. Hit that notification bell. Let me know what you guys want to see in future videos. And as always, thank you for watching. Take care, Thailands. God bless. Pursue passion.